Welcome to the Freight Project podcast, brought to you by Ceresys, a North American third-party logistics company providing shippers transportation management technology and solutions.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Freight Project podcast. On today's episode, we welcome Hannah Testani, Chief Operating Officer of Intelligent Audit, a global logistics and freight audit company. In this episode, Hannah and I will talk about how she got involved in the logistics industry and how she, as COO, is positioning Intelligent Audit for the future, aiding her father, who founded the company over 20 years ago. Hannah and I then tackle one of the biggest issues shippers face today: rising transportation costs. We'll address how shippers can overcome rising rates by getting access to better data, all while increasing customer loyalty and the ability to retain customers more effectively by leaning on data to improve overall customer experience. Hannah then illuminates how carriers evolve the way in which they charge shippers and how shippers who understand these changes are poised to address these changes and are able to mitigate rising costs. And finally, we address the role of technology providers as a partner to shippers and the role technology plays in aiding shippers to combat rising costs and find available capacity. We hope you enjoy this episode of the Freight Project podcast. And thank you for joining us today, Hannah, on the Freight Project podcast. I know our listeners are going to be truly educated with your unique insights as the COO of Intelligent Audit, a great freight audit and payment company. And with your experience working with shippers and carriers as a freight audit and payment company, I'm sure that our listeners will learn a lot. So thanks for being on the episode today.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
Okay, so we always like to know, who are the people our listeners are going to hear from today. So tell us a little bit about yourself, besides being COO of Intelligent Audit, and a little bit more about Intelligent Audit beyond just the freight audit and payment company moniker.
Sure. So my name is Hannah Testani. I have been at the company now for almost 9 years. It's actually my father's company, so he started it officially about 22 years ago. And although I've been here for 8 years full-time, I always kind of joke that when I was younger, if I wanted to go out to the mall or go out with my friends, I always had to do some work for him first. So I've really grown up around it, and it's kind of been in my blood for quite some time now. But Intelligent Audit is a freight audit and payment company. Our differentiation in the marketplace is that we're a technology company at the core. So we leverage the software to be able to do a complete audit on all of our customers' data across all modes, all regions, all currencies. And in addition to auditing the data, so make sure that you are properly charged for every shipment, both contractual as well as if it was a legitimate charge. We also do, and we have a very complicated BI system. So in terms of leveraging your data to be able to ship smarter and continually reduce costs, that's really our bread and butter and where we like to fit in with our customers. So it's much more than just a freight audit company. It's really a technology platform that leverages your shipping data to identify opportunities to save potential money, as well as just ship smarter and get your packages delivered to your customers on time.
And that's interesting. And you said your father's had the company for 22 years, and I just wrapped up our podcast with one of our co-founders who started Ceresys 20 years ago. And the last question I asked him, I said, okay, so you said a lot of stuff, a lot of good educational tips here for shippers. What would be the most important thing for executives or even, managers who are having to deal with shipping and making it more cost effective, making it more efficient, so you can, as you said, get your product to your customer on time? At the end of the day, that's ultimately what matters. He said it was all about the data and using the data to your advantage. And it sounds like what Intelligent Audit has really hit on is one of the key factors in shippers achieving their goals. And so you see in this data, what everybody's seeing right now is its transportation costs are on the rise. And there's also issues with finding capacity. And so it's a market that is in the favor not of the shippers from a cost perspective. So how do shippers deal with these rising transportation cost inflations, given that labor shortage, and as we're starting to see fuel prices creep up again?
Yeah, so it's definitely a hard time to be a shipper, and it's for everything that you mentioned, as well as the Amazon effect, right? So, how are they affecting the industry, the e-com bubble, right? So, even shippers and consumers' demands are dramatically changing, and we're seeing now more than ever just the need to be able to understand your data and look for opportunities to protect your margins. And you can do that in many different ways. And the objective is really to ship smarter, which you can't do until you have analyzed your data. So there's different things that we work with our customers for. So some things like, figuring out the 2-day effect from Amazon. So how can you service your consumers to, one, retain them, and two, get new ones? So understanding your 1-day or 2-day ground footprints from each DC. Things like figuring out where you can do zone skipping. So where you have the capacity where you don't have to ship from your DC, you could actually fill up a truck and then you take that to 1 or 2 DCs and then leverage the 1-2-day footprint from there. So there's a lot of opportunities. Also service utilization. There are more carriers than there ever were before. So understanding how to properly use them, as well as what services to use. So, a couple years ago, it was really just UPS and FedEx that were dominating the parcel market. Now USPS is becoming a dominant player. They have incredibly competitive rates. They're going above and beyond to really trying to tap back into the market. I think that, 2 to 3 years from now, we're going to see them being pretty competitive. But otherwise, it's just knowing how to ship smarter. So consolidating when there's opportunities to do that, figuring out the right DC, so inventory management, so that you can truly achieve that Amazon effect and retain your customers and, again, get new customers.
So it sounds like all hands are on deck in almost every department to retain customers. And what we see from the heads of marketing, now the heads of supply chain, the management level, the people, the logistics managers, even the transportation coordinators, and especially the CEOs, hashtag customer experience, right? All because of hashtag the Amazon effect that you've mentioned several times here today. And that might seem it's because the customer's now in control, not the producers. They used to say back in the early 1900s that you could get a Model T Ford in any color as long as it was black. Essentially, the manufacturers, were dictating the market. And today, the consumer is all powerful. So when there's, loyalty declining among consumers on who they buy from, especially as they have their expectations pretty hard set because of Amazon, how do shippers compete in that environment to continue to retain customers in a ever loyalty declining world?
So I love that question for a bunch of reasons, and I'll kind of try and tackle them individually. So first and foremost, we are seeing marketing teams collaborate with logistics teams more than ever before. And they're doing that for, many different reasons. But first and foremost, there's so much money that is going out there to just try and obtain a customer for the first time. And what was never being looked at before were how many customers would be dropped off because they had a poor delivery exception or a poor delivery experience. And I know if I think about it from my perspective, when I go home and I go to my mailbox, my USPS driver has become so creative with how much he could jam into my mailbox. And there's damaged shipments there. I mean, we're part of all these subscriptions where we're getting like makeup delivered and alcohol delivered and coffee delivered. And when I open the package, if I don't have the right experience in terms of how it's supposed to look like, if the box should be shouldn't be damaged, and now there's glass shattered. So all of these things go into consideration as I personally, as a consumer, decide if I'm going to continue using a product or if I'm going to look elsewhere. So what we've been doing is really collaborating with the marketing team and the logistics team for different things. So first and foremost, it's the footprint of where their reach is today. So, we have a cool perspective where we sit because we see every single shipment that's shipping out to on behalf of our shippers from all the different modes. So we see all of the inbound shipments, drop shipments, outbound from each DC, the e-commerce shipments, the direct to store shipments. So we can see where each shipper's reaches. So if looking at it from a heat map perspective, we see what states they have the highest shipping volumes to, as well as where they might have the most amount of exceptions. And we really take that latter part and key into it. So if you're a subscription company, which they've been rising, and we have a lot of them as customers, their questions are, what can we be doing to retain customers? And where we came in to help them with the data perspective is, have you guys ever considered that you might be losing customers because of the delivery experience and because there might be exceptions? So we found out that there were a lot of issues in terms of damaged packages, service commitments, and how that affected a customer's their desire to continue using you. So for one customer in particular, we looked at all their shipments domestically in the US. They have about 4 DCs that they fulfill from today. And we found that there was one DC that continued to have the highest damaged rates. And because of their product, the damaged package really ruined the entire customer experience. So we drilled into that DC. They had different customers or different employees that came from the other DCs on site at this one DC to reduce the amount of damaged packages that they were creating. And we watched that kind of play out, and it dramatically reduced the amount of exceptions. And we saw a huge increase in terms of retainability from a customer retention perspective. So just using that data that you would never really think to do from the marketing perspective has been amazing for us. And what I always say, the marketing team, poor them that they feel like it's always their fault when customers, don't retain. And really, it could be the logistics fault. So it's trying to be collaborative between the two teams to alleviate those issues.
Yeah, and working off a shared, page of data that, is true and verified, and you can speak to the facts, not to your gut or to your anecdotal stories that you might be sharing around the office. And so I think data is again, it comes into key positions whenever you're trying to avoid and mitigate exceptions. There is no perfect shipment. It happens from time to time, no problems. But typically, you might think that it's going to be priced at this invoice, and when you get it back, you see, oh, wait a minute, there's a bunch of accessorials, or they reweighed my shipment, and this is not exactly what I was expecting to pay, or this carrier continually damages our stuff. And if you don't have a TMS or an invoice auditing company like Intelligent Audit, bringing that data in that you can coalesce and maybe put to a scorecard so you can make some actionable decisions based on that data to truly improve your overall operations. And at the heart of understanding that data, it comes technology and being willing to work with other people in your organization to achieve company goals. So I think that mindset is key. Now, in kind of speaking about exceptions, accessorials is almost like a 4-letter word to shippers these days. And I don't think until recently, and maybe it took the capacity crunch and the labor shortage of drivers and the increased cost to do it, a perfect storm. But it seems like only recently that they're really starting to go, oh, accessorials, what are those? I should probably pay attention. When us on the auditing side and the data side, folks like you, Hannah, and us at Cerasis have said for years, this is a great way for you to either pre-negotiate accessorials or understand that things are changing and carriers are going to try and make money off of it. And you should expect accessorials with these new services. And so, how are shippers to respond to carriers always getting creative with these add-on costs known as accessorials?
Yeah, I think creativity there is key. And it's definitely become a focal point for our customers. So there's always been a lot of attention on how much you're paying from the freight perspective. Very little control in general over fuel, but the big area as accessorials, and especially as the profile of customers are changing, where you're shipping now to residential locations, trying to achieve that the Amazon effect, you're paying more in accessorials. And the question there is, what does your profile look like as a shipper? And have you negotiated the best contract to do that? And before you can negotiate any contract and go back to the carrier with any information, you have to understand your data. So what we do for all of our customers is we give them a carrier benchmark for every single one of their carriers. And it's really meant to be able to give them the ability to be more productive when they have conversations with the carriers. And it's really important because the carriers are going to come and they're going to give you their story. And it's important for you as a shipper to have your own same set of facts. And, between that approach, you can really collaborate to reduce exceptions and, hopefully reduce how much you're paying for each shipment. But you mentioned something before that I thought was very interesting, which is the delivery exceptions. And what we always tell our customers is yes, it's great to point the finger and say, hey, UPS, FedEx, or CH Robinson, you have the highest amount of exceptions. Figure this out, or I'm going to take my business away from you. And we really want to shift that mindset to instead take a look at every single exception and say, well, who can fix this? So what is controllable versus non-controllable? And really zoom in onto the issues that are controllable. So a controllable issue can be a carrier issue, it could be the shipper issue, or it could be the end consumer issue. So it could be a carrier issue if we're seeing that they have more and more shipments that route through a certain hub that have an exception. When we identify those, you as a shipper, when you have this benchmark and this scorecard, you can have a meaningful conversation with your carrier, and you can say, hey, UPS, I'm showing that all of my shipments that go through Louisville, Kentucky have a 2% higher exception rate. And with that data, they can go back and try and reduce that. Or it could be the shipper issue. So it could be the damaged shipments. It could be an issue with a printer creating labels that aren't readable by the carrier. It could be a packaging issue, or it could be a consumer issue. So it could be that there is an address correction issue, but they're not available for the first or second delivery. Whatever it is, unless you understand the data and have it broken out in a way that's actionable, you're really not going to be productive. And that's where we sit. It's understanding data, and we get so much data, especially when we can partner with a TMS provider like yourself, where we can join more elements. So the ability to take carrier invoice data, a TMS feed, really marry those two data sets, and then in turn produce reporting to our customers that show them exactly where exceptions are and what the opportunity is for saving, allows them to action it in a way that reduces cost as well as reduces exceptions.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sounded what you described like were the powerful optimization tools that you can purchase for your computer, to automatically defrag or, catch cached files that maybe you don't need, and it clears it out of the system to make your computer run more efficiently. And thus, the overall value of that asset that you're using, the computer, has a better ROI over time because you're not having to replace it. You're continually getting optimized. Doesn't sound much different when it comes to the visibility into your shipping and overall logistics processes that getting that data you provide your shipper customers can allow. And so let's talk about visibility, right? That's such a loaded word in our industry. It really is. And it means so much to so many different people. But why is it important to kind of have verified data that maybe a single provider who has insight and integration hooks or works with many modes and many different kinds of shippers who can give you that network visibility to get creative? What does that mean? How do you continue to reinforce the importance of seeing that or visibility in your supply chain and what it can mean for you to really approach this challenging logistics environment we're in?
Yeah, so think about it from a personal perspective. If I told you that every single month you had $1,000 worth of expenses, your first question would be, well, how does that break out to each expense? What am I paying for my utilities, my phone, my credit card, my, food, whatever it is. And if you ask most shippers what they spend today, as crazy as it might be, they won't know how to answer that. And that's because there are so many different modes and regions and divisions of a company that what we really stress is it's important to be able to have one company like Intelligent Audit take all of your data. So when I say that, I truly mean all your shipping data. So intra-US, intra-Latam, India, Brazil, China, Japan, Europe, anywhere where you're shipping, we take all of that data and we bring into the system. So first and foremost, you understand what your potential scope is. You understand what your shipping volumes look like. That allows us to do things like fraudulent reporting. It also allows us to do anomaly detection. So we take all of our customers' data and we profile you. So let's say, Adam, you create a new company tomorrow and you're starting to ship different products from your house. We will understand everything about your data from over 100 different KPIs. So we will know what you look like in terms of how many shippers you use, how many carriers, how many modes, what regions you ship to, what your cost per pound is, what services you use, what is a fair spike in your data, what your accessorials might look like. And we are constantly profiling you. And this is happening from the systems perspective. There's no one who does any of this manually at our company. So we're taking your data and we're saying, okay, I understand exactly what your company looks like. And then from there, as you start shipping more, we are continuously taking that data and analyzing it, looking for any kind of anomalies. So the second we see an issue, so for example, maybe your cost per pound is spiking for a particular service in a particular region, we will zoom in on that and we will pick up the phone, we will call you and say, hey, Adam, it looks like your shipments that you were shipping from China to Japan are spiking. What is driving that? And you might come back to me and say, yeah, it's a marketing promotion that I'm doing. I'm trying to get these new SKUs out there, or it's an issue. Whatever it is, we are going to work with you to reduce those going forward and make sure you're aware of it. So having the ability to take all of your data and standardize it, normalize it, and give it to you in one system allows you to again, just ship smarter because you know what's going on. It also allows you to do different things like mode optimization, right? So if you have one company that touches your parcel and then someone else who touches your bulk, so your trucking, your LTL, your intermodal, your ocean, your rail, you can't look for synergies, right? So when we have everything in one platform, then we have the ability to say, okay, well, you have all of these parcel shipments that you can truckload, and instead you can truck those to the different hubs and inject them there and leverage those truckload rates to be able to ship smarter. So you're shipping cheaper and you're getting packages delivered quicker to your end customers.
Yeah, that sounds almost right out of our recent full truckload series. I love that. That's exactly right. And I think a lot of people are probably missing an opportunity when they don't look at mode optimization. But it's hard to get there if you don't have the data. And you've really described in your answers what I think is just phenomenal. In a way, if you're starting to see hitting Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal, where executives are starting to finally look at transportation costs as impacting their business, which is good. But it's surprising, I guess, to me, and maybe to you too, working in the industry, how there haven't been more stories about that before. But I get it. We're in the middle of a capacity crunch and transportation rates are some of the highest we've seen. But having said that, as an executive yourself at Intelligent Audit and working with executives as your customers, maybe it's changing, but do you think executives know enough about their own shipping practices and cost inputs into what it takes to get that done? And if so, do you see a difference in the success of companies whose executives are more ingrained with that versus companies whose executives aren't?
Yeah, so I feel like so many customers today are just struggling to get by, whether they're competing with Amazon and they're just being completely slammed in terms of having to cut down shipping costs, or just not having the time to really evaluate what their shipping profile looks like. And it's really going to hinder them from my perspective going forward, because if you get stuck in the same rut, you're never looking for ways to optimize and become more efficient, then you'll just get trampled by these bigger companies where that's all they're doing. I mean, put yourself in these, bigger shippers' perspective. They have teams dedicated to always making sure that they understand their data, and more importantly, they're looking for ways to reduce their costs and have a bigger reach in terms of their consumers, and be able to leverage their network to reduce the amount of days it takes for packages to be delivered. So if you don't have the time now, then it'll only get exponentially worse as they continue to get better and you're kind of struggling behind.
Absolutely. Well, it's a competitive advantage, and if you see it like that as an executive, one, reducing transportation costs is a lot like reducing electricity cost. It typically goes right back to your bottom line. But with, again, customers' experience as the mantra and competing, frankly, against Amazon and your other competitors, if you can get that little bit of logistics prowess up over and above your competitors, then that's just that little bit of competitive advantage that you can get. And if you put in a program where you have all of that data and visibility, where the goal of getting that essentially is ongoing, and maybe this is repetitive, continuous improvement, but and there's something to be said about being able to continually ferret out unneeded costs, identifying what new promotions or changes in your inputs to transportation result in X, Y, and Z. So that is super key. Now, we've kind of really established, the importance of data, the importance of visibility, the importance of the C-suite to know about that data and information, and most importantly, cross-collaboration and working strategically in order to survive and thrive and gain a competitive advantage. But with all of that said, is that the same thing that shippers should be focusing on over the next year? Or what do you think will be the greatest challenge for shippers to maintain efficiency and reduce costs in the next 12 months?
I think the biggest vulnerability that they have is not understanding what others are doing in the industry. So when you feel like you're just swimming alone, you have no idea if you're fast or slow. So what we're doing is we have these collaborative webinars, as well as just when you're working with Intelligent Audit, we take all of our customers, and because we're constantly talking to them, whether they're asking for new reporting or they want to look at their data in a new way, it allows us from our perspective where we sit to understand what one customer wants and how they're thinking about the data, and really allow everyone else to be able to be on the same page. So we never tell anyone else, here's what XYZ's cost per pound is, or what their costs look like. But what we do is, if you decide to subscribe to this feature, we track what you're doing from our systems perspective, and we show other customers what other companies in your industry are looking at with their data. So it could be someone that's in your industry or just similar shipping profile. And when you log into the system, you can see what KPIs they're looking at. So whether it's carrier benchmarking, things like average business days, an obvious big one today is ground footprint. So what is your 1 day ground footprint, on time percentages, and many others. And other companies can log into the system and see that same reporting suite, and now get their mind jogging to think about the same opportunities for them to apply the data. So I think it just, it's being nimble, both I think as an executive and as a shipper. You have to stay nimble in the industry. You have to constantly be looking for ways to improve. It always is easy to stay doing what you're doing, right? That's just inertia. But you have to change to be able to stay competitive in the industry. And that applies to really everything that I think you do from a business perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, it keeps you on your toes. That's for sure. Keeps logistics managers employed. Sometimes they think of technology as possibly a threat to their jobs, but the reality is it's such a complex shipping environment that it takes technology for you to have as a partner in order to have a level ground. And so you can build off of that foundation to become more strategic and work on other ancillary goals that we've all had as a to-do on our to-do list forever that we just couldn't get to because of the day-to-day. And that's really what it's all about, freeing you from being so ingrained in the weeds of process till you can finally rise up and look at things with a clear-eyed, objective view in order to truly start making decisions based off of that data you're seeing to get you closer to those goals you've previously abandoned because you didn't have the time. So with that, in that technology role that you play in shipping, a fantastic role, you obviously are, as a COO, have your eyes out onto what's next in the industry, what's going to impact us the most that Intelligent Audit needs to be ready for and to explain to our customers and possibly implement into our technology. What would you see is one of the greatest technologies that maybe we should be all looking at to potentially impact our day-to-day lives in shipping and transportation?
Yeah, I mean, as much as I hate to say it, blockchain probably is something that we'll be hearing more and more buzz about. So
you just don't want to add to the buzz, right? It feels like you're buzz killing in a way, but I get what you're saying. Yeah,
it's just we went to beta and everyone just like talking about blockchain, and from my perspective, it almost seems like a solution looking for a problem. But I do think that if everyone is a participant in this forward-thinking mindset, blockchain would definitely be applied to supply chain in an effective manner. So figuring out, who has your product any single time. So the inbound, the cross-border, the cross-dock, the ocean moving, the customs and duties portion. I mean, if you think about like any product that you have at home, if it's imported or exported from a different country, it's made so many different moves until it gets to you. So the immutable hyperledger, yada yada, sounds perfect, but until then, I mean, we have we have way too many conversations about blockchain, and I think it's years out from being applied to the industry, but hopefully at some point our development team can get excited and they'll have something to actually
exactly.
do.
Well, it's kind of like, the Internet of Things, and it gets hyped real quick and it'll continue to be talked about. But until we have standards and more people coming to use it, that network effect, I believe, is what will finally make, blockchain and those kinds of technologies much more valuable at the end of the day. But, with procurement and payments and documents, as you mentioned, import, export documents, it seems to make sense. So definitely something to keep our eye on. I know we're covering it. We want our shippers to be aware of it as a technology provider ourselves. So you can blame us maybe partly for continuing the hype, if you will. Hope we don't hype it out. But Hannah, really insightful interview today. Thank you for joining us here on the Freight Project podcast. I hope we can have you again sometime in the future. I know we'll be paying attention here at Ceresys to everything that you and Intelligent Audit are doing. Make sure you guys check them out. What's the website so they have it, Hannah?
It is intelligentaudit.com.
Cool. Well, thanks again for being on the show today. And for all of our listeners, have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.